I'm gonna go back up to the, I'm gonna go around again. Go to refinancing effort.
Commissioner, the RFQ committee has met and has a selection, but before we do that, our financial advisor has a brief PowerPoint for the committee, just to understand how this whole process works,
Okay.
what underwriting.
Well, not what handout.
It's handouts. Diane?
And then explain what,
Come on up.
explain what RFQ is,
Request for qualification.
and what's the difference between RFP and RFQ?
RFP is stands for request for proposal.
Okay.
That's when our process is that we ask for a cost with our RFP. With the RFQ, you're just qualifying people. You don't ask for a cost until later if you need to, and that's what we did for this
So most of the-
procedures.
And most of these folks are qualified already? I mean, you follow a standard by the industry? That's how you use to qualify people?
Well, what we did, sir, we advertised it just like any other procurement that we would do. And we had a pre-qualification meeting, just like we would have a pre-proposal meeting or pre-bid
Okay.
meeting. We had an evaluation committee, just like we have an evaluation committee for an RFP. That evaluation committee evaluated 28 responses to the RFQ. And then out of that 28, they interviewed, I believe, 16.
Okay.
And then out of the 16, 8 elevated to the short list. And so it's similar to the RFP process, but we just didn't look at cost at this time.
I get you. And mostly in the cost segment would be, is a lot of that dictated by the interest rates of the banks and all of that? Or is it more?
Yeah, I'll let Diane take it from here.
All right, that's my good segue into you.
Okay, and
I'm just trying to get the public to understand, a lot of the underwriters that we pick are based on qualifications by the Security Exchange, SEC, Commission, set those things, but we're looking at who can actually manage the process for us.
our bottom line is who is best capable of delivering the very lowest interest rate for the county. And since we've got several issues, refunding issues that are to be done, we had a discussion and I had recommended that we come up with a pool of ultimately 8 qualified underwriters that are all qualified and can be selected from.
This is a pool of people.
Right,
Not
and
just
so,
one.
exactly. It's
Okay.
a pool of 8. And so for a large issue, we may have 3 to 5 underwriters that need to be selected for a large issue, small issue, 1 or 2.
How
So
many issues we got out there?
I think we've got 7,
7? And how many people? 1, 2,
9,
3,
excuse me, 9
Nine.
1,
issues.
2, 3,
And 8.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay.
And we have 9 issues ultimately of varying sizes to be done. And so in this PowerPoint, you'll see, we'll talk a little bit about exactly what an underwriter does, how you select an underwriter, how you don't select an underwriter, what we look for in an underwriter, what we included in the RFQ, and then talk about how an underwriter gets paid and comparing compensation. The compensation is based on how long the issue goes out, and how complex the issue is. Those kinds of things will impact the compensation. So exactly what do they do? This is a presentation. I took from a presentation I did for the GFOA back in 2010,
What is GFOA?
the Government Finance Officers Association.
Okay.
And you'll see that you have the issuer is the center point. You've got advisors, your bond counsel and your financial advisor. And basically, the issuer sells their bonds to an underwriter. The underwriter pays the issuer for the bonds. Then the underwriter sells the bonds to investors. And that's how the underwriter makes their money. And they make their money on the spread, the difference between what they pay you for them and what they're able to sell them for. The underwriters oftentimes will provide suggestions ideas and suggestions on structure, timing, and marketing of the bonds. The way they're structured is on the next page. They are what we call a broker-dealer. They've got an investment banker who's the guy that you guys usually see. They're the ones that interact with the issuer, provide the ideas, etc. They have analysts that work with them, that run the numbers, work under them on the structure, those kinds of things. Then on the other side of the, within them, they have the underwriters and the brokers. The brokers actually sell the bonds. So the investment banker talks to the underwriter, and the underwriter's talking to the brokers. The brokers are telling the underwriter what is selling best, what kind of interest rates they see, what they think their investors want to see on the bonds. Then the underwriter works with the investment banker to communicate that to the issuer. So how do you select one? Well, there's always an ongoing debate about competitive sale versus negotiated sale. And a competitive sale, the underwriter selected on the day of the day the bonds were sold, based only on the combination of what they're getting paid plus the interest rate they propose. This is the way we sell your tax anticipation notes every year. The negotiated sale, the underwriter selected in advance based on their qualifications. And then we negotiate the compensation and the interest rates. And I, as financial advisor, I assist in that negotiation based on our knowledge of what the interest rates. We have a pricing desk, for example, that accumulates all the bonds that price all across the country every single day. We price more bonds every year than any single underwriter does. And so we provide guidance on where those interest rates ought to be and what the appropriate compensation is. How you don't select an underwriter. Okay? The quantitative analysis isn't everything. If you're buying professional services, not a fire truck. The lowest fees, we always say, is that how you would select your surgeon? You know, the very lowest fee, their fee is their spread, their takedown. They're called a couple of different things in the industry, and their fee is much lower than what the interest cost is on a bond issue. So we could have somebody come in and propose a very low fee, but if they can't deliver the very lowest interest rates, it's going to cost you a lot more in the long run. We could pay an underwriter $5 a bond, $5 per thousand, which would be a very typical compensation, and pay another one $6 a thousand. But if that one that's at $6 a thousand can deliver a lower interest rate, that dollar differential gets eaten up real quick, extremely fast. And so we have to look at, and that's what we've looked at in coming up with this pool of underwriters. These are all underwriters that should have the resources it's a supply and demand. They have to generate the demand for your bonds that's going to result in the lowest interest cost. We want more and more investors.
Let me ask you a question about resources.
Yes, sir.
Because it seems like the companies that are chosen are majority powerful companies that have been around a long time. How does it allow for women and minority companies to be a part? Is there a standard process that was used? Because it seemed like, I don't know how long it was out there and how long do people have to respond. I don't know the language that you all use, but looking at what I'm looking at, these are traditional companies, but I'm looking at the ones who were interviewed and didn't make it. A lot of my women and minority-owned companies, so I don't know if they wrote anything in to talk about how the process was. I want to make sure that we just didn't use a process, that we were able to use a process that allowed women and minority companies to competitively compete for this, and it seemed like based on, unless I'm wrong, I don't know all those companies, but looking at some that's on the other list, the women and minority companies didn't make the short list. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Commissioner, we did inform our LSBEs and WBEs and MBEs that this solicitation was out for advertisement, and we also, told our primes to try to do what they could to incorporate them. However, we do not have anyone that is certified in underwriting.
Right, I was focusing mainly on just prime, not LSB or
Okay.
that. Will these firms that compete, did they feel like it was an opportunity to do it at their level? Based on what I'm seeing, I don't see a lot of them that were up in the top
Yes,
of
sir.
echelon.
MR Bill and Company
Yes,
is
ma'am.
in fact a local
That was local.
minority firm.
Okay, okay.
They're the ones that succeeded Jackson Securities.
Already?
Yes,
Yes.
they were formerly Jackson Securities.
One out of, what, 8? That was it? So they made the list?
Correct.
Okay.
We had a couple of others that really had very little, they have no local,
Okay,
no local professionals here
okay.
and very little experience in our market.
So when you see our market, they may not, in the South, or they have experience in they do deals. Is it a difference in terms of how you do bond deals, or is it just, you focus on region?
Region.
But they
Making sure.
could do it, they just didn't have regional presence.
And talk about how important that is. Why
The-
can
Yeah.
I get somebody from California? I'm just gonna lead her in the question, because I think I know what you're getting to.
Right, but the regional presence is important because they can be here when you need them to be here. I think the other thing is they understand our market better. They understand what goes on within the government. And a lot of times, part of what is important in being able to sell this to the investors is to be able to tell your story. And nobody understands the story of DeKalb County better than the people who are actually in the metro Atlanta area.
Mr. Chairman, here's another aspect of that, is that you get the best rates the closer you sell to the actual holder of the bond.
Right.
And so if a member of our underwriters has to sell their bond to another financial firm and they sell it to another, each of those is going to want to make a profit. On the other hand, if we have a good network of underwriter offices and brokers here in the area, they can sell it directly to individuals that want to hold public sector debt. And those folks will, because they're buying retail, will accept a lower interest rate. And so we'll get a better deal. But that's only if they have investors that want to buy DeKalb debt, and those are generally the ones that have a window on DeKalb operations.
That's correct. And the people the investors that are in Georgia that get a double tax exemption. They get a
Okay.
federal and state. And therefore, the interest rates that they're willing to accept will be lower than if you're selling to investors out west somewhere that really don't understand our county, or they don't get the double tax exemption.
So based on the intelligence that you have to have, wouldn't a lot of those underwriters have a lot of that inside information about,
We don't talk about inside information.
I mean, whatever you
Familiarity with the market.
No.
Yes, these
Y'all know what I mean,
companies,
it's relationships. You can't get around it. Play the game if you want to, but it's relationships.
all of these companies, or most all these companies, have investment bankers and brokers on the ground here in the metropolitan Atlanta area.
Okay, right, and so those other ones that's outside, even though it may be in California, they may know what, looking at our trends and who have bought bonds from us before, who they might can sell to. So it may not take a rocket scientist to figure out, because they'll get our information. They can say, okay, this company A bought from us, so why not, can I go back to them since they bought from us before? So really, the regional issue is significant, but it's not, because a company can look at the information on how transactions happened before and actually go to those companies and make a sales pitch.
Right, but I think that what we expect is that those companies that have bought before have relationships with the broker dealers that have been selling your bonds in the past.
Right.
They have stronger ongoing relationships.
Okay. I just want to get a better understanding, but this is a good PowerPoint.
So we don't select based on the lowest fee, and that's why we asked them for their approach to their pricing, so that we ensured that we understood exactly how their fees would be approached, and that they were comparable and fair, and we'll hold them to that as we move forward. And then a lot of folks, this last one is not, a lot of folks will ask, well, give us your interest rate on a specific date, and try to compare the underwriters based on the interest rates on those days. We always call that biggest liar wins, because they never have to actually price the bonds on that day. You say, okay, well, tell us what our interest rates would have been on July 5th of this year, and try to compare how they do that. They're not going to have to sell the bonds on July 5th of this year. That's why we call it biggest liar wins. It's whoever, and that's not a real effective way to compare the underwriters. Although I didn't mean to imply that they were liars, but
Most optimistic.
the most optimistic, excuse me, that's the better. So what we looked for was their experience. And the funny thing is, everybody's number one at something, and that is sure enough the way it came out. Everybody's number one at something. So what we asked for is their experience over the last 3 years, the experience of the firm over the last 3 years, and the experience of the lead banker over the last 3 years. Because sometimes they move around to different companies, and that lead banker's experience is very important. Their applicable experience. And that is, how well have they sold Georgia GO bonds? How well have they sold Georgia water and sewer bonds? So that's what we want really to see, is their local experience. And we ask for the annual totals. Going on to the next page, higher demand means lower interest costs, and that's really what we are focused on. Investor coverage by the firm's brokers. We want them to make sure that they've got Georgia retail accounts, because again, they're going to accept the very lowest interest rates. And then institutional account coverage. That's the insurance companies, the big banks. And so we want those that have good Georgia institutional coverage as well as national institutional coverage. And that's one of the other things that we find, that the firms that have a strong local presence in Georgia also have strong connections with the institutional buyers in Georgia, who really do buy a tremendous amount of your bonds. And then actual distribution on similar issues. And we look for case studies, things like other bonds that they've sold. How was that pricing? They went out with the interest rates at one level, and then they had to cut you come back and indicate what your repricing was, how you had to adjust the interest rates to get the bonds sold. And we never like to see we want them to go out with interest rates that are as close to where the investors will buy as possible. If they go out with interest rates that are too high, then they're going to have way too many orders for the bonds, and they'll come back and lower the interest rates. It's sort of a balancing act. You lower the interest rates so that some of those orders fall away. But if we go out with, and I'm just going to throw numbers out, if they go out with an interest rate of like 5% and it should have been 4%, you'll never get it back down to 4%. You might get it down to 4.5% if we're lucky, but you'll never get those buyers back down because they're wanting the 5%.
So rapidly selling our bonds is not a good indicator of our creditworthiness?
No. That's a good indicator that the interest rates are too high.
Good.
Say that again.
That's what Burl used to say.
If the bonds sell too quickly and there are too many orders for all the bonds,
Right.
like you have 10 million bonds that are due in 2020. Well, if you have 5 orders there for 10 million apiece, you've got 50 million in orders. That's 5 times oversubscribed is what we would call that. Well, if it's 5 times oversubscribed, that's gonna mean the interest rate was too high. And again, you're never gonna get that back.
It's like if you price your house too low, you're gonna get a lot of offers on it.
Right. Okay.
You know, I would rather see us go out and, well, I mean, ideally, you wanna go out and have all your orders filled and no more than that. You know,
You mean orders?
that means like if
The
you're
9
selling
that
10.
we have out?
Yes. You know, if you were gonna do, ideally, if you were gonna sell 10 million in bonds, you'd love 10 million in orders. Now, if you come
So
back
how do
with,
you got 9 people we trying to shortlist. You got 9 orders. How do you determine who?
Hold on, she'll answer.
we won't
Keep
have
going.
9 people on every deal.
Just keep going. Well, and if you let us finish the theory.
Okay, help me.
Okay, just hold on.
So we wanna see how they've distributed bonds in the past. And then another thing that concerns us is when someone is selling to the street. You know, we want somebody that has brokers that sell to investors, to actual investors. We call those going away orders. This industry's got more lingo than you can shake a stick at. But we want them to be selling directly to investors, not to other broker dealers that are then gonna sell it to investors. So the evaluation committee, I think, looked very hard at making sure that they were selling, that all of those companies were actually selling to investors, not simply putting them off to the street, selling them to other broker dealers that are gonna mark them up and sell them to somebody else.
Wow.
Underwriting capacity is another issue, and what this amounts to is if it's a measurement that the SEC comes up with, basically, and it says you can underwrite so many millions of dollars in bonds. Well, the big guys can underwrite billions of dollars in bonds.
And who are the big guys?
Oh, that would be Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, Morgan Stanley, all these guys pretty much. MRBO would probably be the smallest.
What the other folk are the big guys?
But everybody else could underwrite more bonds than we'll ever sell at once.
I got you.
Now, if they don't have the capacity to buy all of your bonds, like we like for them to underwrite some of the bonds. In other words, not sell all of them. We want them to be priced so that most of them are sold, but not all of them are sold.
They have to hold on to them.
They have to underwrite them
'Cause they got
and
the-
sell them
they got the
off
capacity.
in the
Got money
future.
in the bank.
Well, if they don't have the capacity, that means that they've got to price your bonds to sell. They've got to price them so that they're all sold that day. So you want to have firms that have adequate underwriting capacity to get your bonds put away, to buy some of your bonds and hold them and sell them off over time if the market's extremely volatile, those kinds of things. And we did look for that was one of our questions, was for the firms to give us examples of where they had underwritten bonds. So we made sure that they all had examples and cases where they had actually underwritten, didn't have orders for all of the bonds. And the next page just talks about the things that we like to see from the case studies, the description, the structure, compensation, interest rate, and how they distributed the bonds, the amount that was underwritten. Other consideration. Now, this is where we get sort of into our local, I think the that understand what the accreditation process was, how it impacts them locally, what's likely to happen, and be able to explain to investors and rating agencies that it does not impact their financial position. Because we didn't want those school systems getting higher interest rates just because there was some rumor that, about the accreditation process. So that's why that local understanding is very important. Analytical capabilities and market resources. That's where we talk about, do they have brokers that can sell your bonds, etc. Real and perceived conflict of interest. We want to make sure there aren't finder's fees or fee splitting. There's some new regs that are coming out. Everybody's looking at that real carefully. And we made sure that we put in the provisions that they had to disclose to us any arrangements like that. And before they are selected for a deal, we will ask them to make those representations, to update those representations. And then regulatory issues. We look at whether they've had any enforcement actions or disciplinary actions. Then how they get paid, the components of how they get paid is their management fee. That's for the work that the investment bankers do. With a financial advisor, that's typically extremely low or zero. Takedown, that's the sales commissions that go to the brokers. So we want to make sure that those brokers are getting paid enough to pick up the phone and make the phone calls to get the sales in. And then there are some expenses. But again, this underwriter's compensation pales by comparison to the amount that you'll pay in interest costs. And the next page, final page, shows you that. Just comparing compensation for $14 million of bonds that were sold in 2009. You have one underwriter that bid $5.91 on this $14 million issue. That's $83,150. You have another one that bid $3.80 or $53,000. So number one is $30,000 higher than number two. But if you look over at the interest cost, if number one delivers an interest cost of 3.39%, that's $4.7 million. 3.456%, that's just 7 basis points. That's a very small difference in the interest rate, but it causes the interest cost to go up to $4.9 million. And so while their underwriter's discount might have been $30,000 cheaper, their interest cost is going to be $158,000 higher. So a 5 basis points on interest rate equals $68,000, where $1 on compensation only equaled $14,000. So that's why it's so important that we try to get the underwriters that can deliver, that have the capacity to deliver the very lowest interest rate, generate the highest demand for your bonds, and generate the lowest interest rate as a result. So that's my Underwriter 101. Do you guys have any questions about that information?
And Commissioner Johnson, if I may just say, there's also a steering committee that are not necessarily members of the RFQ committee, but we track and keep a timetable where we should be in this process. That committee meets weekly with bond counsel and lots of other, it's a room full of lawyers and the poor little people in the finance department. So, but we're paying them, so it works out fine.
So you're the ones, you're the gatekeeper to make sure that they have the fees and stuff in line before we go and rate.
I'll review all of that, make
Review all that.
comparisons to the industry and similar transactions to ensure that, in fact, their proposed compensation is reasonable. And I will produce a letter that verifies that I've done that review and come to that conclusion.
Right, so basically you'll be looking at the interest rate.
And
What's
whatever
the
they're
going rate
proposed.
now, right now, if we went to sale today?
For general obligation bonds or
The-
water sewer bonds?
Water.
See, that's the
Both.
thing, every single one of those issues is different.
Can you
And
get
a
that for us?
Sure, I think we've got the last time I ran numbers, the interest rates that I felt like were market rates on all 9 of those transactions. And the interest rate's slightly different. We have that in the, that summary page, it's on top of all the numbers.
But we'll make sure to get
We'll be
that.
sure
Yeah,
you get
I
it.
We
So-
have those interest rates.
And that's subject to move a little.
I
bit.
know,
Yeah.
it'll move, I
moving,
understand that.
because it's, again, what it is today, it moves, it's not static at all.
But it's also based on other factors,
It's based on a lot of factors.
why you get that interest rate versus the,
That's why the interest rate on every one of the bond issues we're looking at is slightly different.
because they have a different rating.
They have different ratings,
Different factors, different payback.
and some of them are 10 years and some of them are 20 years.
And
The
these-
longer they go
this-
out, the higher the rate's gonna be.
And this company, one of these companies will determine that, and then they'll give it to you, and then you'll give it to finance, and finance will make the recommendation and give it to us.
And, well, we'll do it all at one time, at sort of
Okay.
simultaneously.
Commissioner Ray?
So there's a decision that you will have before the board on qualifying, I guess, this group of potential underwriters, right?
That's
And-
my understanding is that there is a action item to qualify all 8 of these.
Okay, and then when we actually go to market and underwrite any particular bond issue, then the board will likewise have to approve the actual underwriting issue, right?
I-
With the people associated with it and that
Well,
sort of a
let-
thing.
Kelvin may be best.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just looking for,
Yeah,
on our
I
behalf,
will come up with a.
what decisions do we have to make
I will work with
and
finance on a
when?
recommendation of who that should be, and then
The CEO will make that.
we make a recommendation to the CEO.
Okay. And you're trying to do it before
And
the
then,
end of the
yes,
year?
you would make the.
And then
Yes.
at the end of that process, so basically, these are pre-qualified.
Right.
They can pick from anybody on this list.
Right.
Then they'll go back to the administration and say, we think that these 3 or 4 are best for this particular bond issue.
Right.
And then they'll bring that back to us to say, we recommend these 4 to handle this particular bond
Of the
issue.
9 orders.
That's
That's
right.
accurate. That's
And then the next time we do it, there'll be a different group likely. And so
But we'll
they'll,
probably be bringing them all at about the same time, because
okay.
we've got these
Then there will
all
be
on the
different
same
groups for
timetable.
different types of issues,
That's
right?
correct.
So
That's
there
correct.
may be 5 different bond issues, but this one will be comprised of, A through C and the other,
And this is only good for 1 year?
No, it's 3 years and a
3 years.
maximum of 5, minimum 3, maximum of 5 years.
Is that in here somewhere?
Yes, sir.
It says a 1 year plus 4 possible 1-year renewal terms,
Okay.
sir.
See,
but if we don't like it, we can cancel it every year, right?
Absolutely.
And one of the things that's gonna be particularly important is that for every single issue, whatever firms are included, we will keep up with all of the orders that they place and the interest rates that they are placing their orders at. And if they don't perform well, if they don't support your issues and try to aggressively market them, then they won't get selected again.
Recommended.
Right.
Excuse me, yes, they won't be, thank you, they won't be recommended again.
So the item tomorrow, critically important, and we appreciate the opportunity to talk today because, as you know, our budget is predicated on this. So hopefully we have answered
2013.
any question. 2030, yeah, our current budget is
The one we
predicated.
in right now?
The one we're in
Yes,
right
sir.
now. So any questions that we need to answer between now and the final item being brought back, we stand ready.
And it's important that we're able to make a decision tomorrow, because
Absolutely.
if we wait for 2 more weeks,
Yeah.
then we won't be able to issue this debt in order to hit our budget this year.
That's it.
Exactly.
That's it. Thank you, Commissioner Rader.
Ms. McNabb, could you be available at 8:30 in the morning?
Yes.
Yes. Wait a minute. Yes, I
I
am.
need you writing it down.
Yes,
Zach
sir.
McNabb.
Yes,
and Diane McNabb.
It's my
All
point.
right, so that'll be good. Yes, sir.
I would just say that I voted against the last bond issue because they didn't go through this process. I think that obviously, there are different levels of participation. You have the big guys, but there should be room for little guys, and particularly, our LSBs and MBEs and that sort of a thing. And I would hope that over time, as we go through this process, you can qualify and bring more of those folks back to us. But I think that what's really important about the process that they've undertaken is that they've made it transparent. They've, allowed everyone to come to the table and make their best shot at this, and that ultimately we'll get much better interest rates for the taxpayers and the ratepayers in DeKalb County than we got for our last bond issue. Because as you know, we paid a high interest, or we were paying higher interest rates, and frankly, we sold that debt before we ever spent it, or before we needed to spend it. So I certainly think that the finance department and the administration is doing a much better job this time, and that I'm going to, I think, support the proposal that they've got.
Thank you, sir.
I agree, but I think for me is that I would like to find a way that we always say that the big guys get it, but I don't see when do the people who are in the minority ever get a chance to the field is never level, because we continue to say, well, we'll try again next year, and we don't make our best effort when we get out the door. So I hope you all would work on that, because I don't know the whole process, but when I started to see a lot of the women in minority firms are still at they not even, I mean, you got one or two shortlisted, but it's we just got to start being more conscious and better on how the process works, because I don't know how these things work, but when I just have red flags that go up in my mind in terms of, because we say, yeah, next year you'll get it and keep moving, but they may feel like there's some factors and some barriers that might have been there, because otherwise you at the top, you keep staying at the top, you never get a chance for the people who are trying to rise to get to that level. Never
We
get
have
there.
several regional firms that have been included in here that
Okay.
aren't national firms. And at least two of the women and minority firms that were not included it was not because they weren't large enough.
Okay. They wasn't large enough, but they could do the work.
Yes,
Okay.
they were large enough.
Talk about, Diane, also for next year, what we're looking at, 2014, that there are going to be other issues, just because I don't know if Commissioner Johnson.
Yeah,
can
there
speak
are
about
more
that.
issues there's a new money issue that will be done next year. Tax anticipation notes will do
Okay.
competitively again.
And you have to do something for 2014 budget, like you're doing for 2013?
We don't intend to, we don't intend to
No, we
build
don't
the
intend
budget.
to, no, that is not the interim CEO's budget strategy, sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
This was
I say that right?
non-traditional.
So we want to try to build in money we don't have. Okay, all right. All right, thank you, but make sure you're here 8:30 to explain to the other commissioners. And I like this process in terms of make sure to get a copy of this tonight, of your, how to select a bond underwriter.
Jay, you'll,
Right now.
thank you, Jay.
Okay, all right.
You said it at 8:30?
Now we'll go to our agenda item, host bond budget transfer. Did I hit everything you needed, CPO?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I got it.
Going to